Hello everyone, welcome to the final topic of Azure Essentials. And in this topic, I'll be talking about the security features that Azure has. Just a disclaimer, I'll be talking about only security features and I'll be showing you hands-on only as much it is needed for data engineers or AI ML engineers. I'll not go deeper into the Azure security, and it would be just like I did for Azure Storage, VM, and VNet. So the basic component of Azure security is RBAC, which is also known as role-based access control. And it is used to provide access to Azure resources. What is meant by Azure resource? Let's say you have a virtual machine, you have a Microsoft Fabric workspace, you have a document in Azure blob storage, or you have a CSV file or a Parquet file in ADLS Gen 2. These are all Azure resources. Virtual network is also an Azure resource. So whatever you can create in Azure or Microsoft environment, those would be Azure resources. And RBAC is used to provide access to those Azure resources, meaning which users, groups, etc. have access or can access those Azure resources. In its bare minimum, RBAC contains three components, and this is very important because whenever we create roles, whenever we provide security, we will be creating these three components only. The first one is the security principal. A security principal is nothing but the entity which is going to use the Azure resource. It can be a user, it can be a group, it can be something called service principal, which resides outside of Azure boundary, or it can be managed identity like any other Azure service. So this is the first entity that we define in RBAC. As I said, it can be a human user, it can be a group of users, or other resources also. Then you have role definition, which contains permissions. So if we have to provide permissions, we collect them together or define them together and put them in something called a role. And after these two things are created, the security principle and the role definition, we define the scope also, which is nothing but the set of resources that the accesses are applied to. And the scope can be at subscription level, it can be at resource group level, or individual resource level also. So this is the final component of Azure RBAC. And you have to combine all of them together using something called a role assignment. As we need all the three components together to provide security, so we need a way to consolidate them so that they can work together. And role assignment is the way to do that. Using role assignment, we consolidate these three components so that they can work together. Now let's do some hands-on using RBAC. So I have these two Azure VMs, the 3IAM public VM and 3IAM private VM. I'll only use one of them, maybe the public VM itself. I'll create a separate user altogether. The user would be completely different than the user that I'm using right now because I have logged in using my own email ID and I'm the owner of the entire Azure account. So my user can do anything. So that's why I'll be creating a separate user, and then I'll use role assignment, which would contain the role, the security principal. Security principal would be the new user that I create, and the scope would be the VM, and I'll assign the role with the VM. Similarly, I can do the same for the private VM also. This is for your exercise. I'll only do the public VM. So I'll create a user, create a role. The user would become the security principal, and then I'll create a role and define the scope and then combine them together using role assignment. And we'll see what this user can do.